Hello everyone, we're continuing our series of talks. With us in the studio is Dr. Michael Laitman. Hello, and our topic for today is the concept of Israel and the nations of the world. We're not talking about governments, of course, or nationality. We're talking about concepts in the wisdom of Kabbalah of Israel and the nations of the world that correspond to the inner and outer part of our desire. So, Baal Sulam, in his article, Introduction to the Book of Zohar, writes that in everything there is an internal and an external part, and also in the land of Israel, like we said on our previous shows, and of course also the internal part and the external part are also divided into internal and external. And if we're talking about the internal part, that's Israel, and the external part are called the nations of the world. And as it writes, Israel too are divided into an inner part, which are desires that aspire for a connection with the Creator, and external or exterior that don't feel it. And in the nations of the world, also there are those that aspire for some kind of connection between them, display some kind of positive influence, kindness, and the destroyers among the nations of the world. We see that there is a clear correspondence. After there is the keter, which is the beginning, the thought. After that, everything divides into four, like we mentioned on our show about spiritual geography. The Yud Kei Vav Kei, and also the four parts of the desire. Everything corresponds to four. And now we'll examine how the concept of Israel and the nations of the world is realized in our corporeal reality, meaning also including in us, people. Meaning we won't only examine desires, however, we would like to examine desires from the perspective of the wisdom of Kabbalah. Baal Sulam writes in the introduction to the Book of Zohar, bear in mind that in everything there is internality and externality. Israel are regarded as the internality of the world, and the 70 nations are regarded as the externality. And he continues and writes, in the study of the 10 Sefirot, it is difficult for beginners, for they perceive matters by means of corporeal boundaries of time and space. However, the authors only use those as signs to point to their upper roots. Right. So what does he mean? Meaning that we don't need to automatically translate it all into our world. We need to examine it according to those qualities and desires in a particular person that define his consciousness and aspiration, etc. So if a person aspires to spirituality, then the aspiration is called Israel, meaning being aimed straight toward the Creator. Who's that person in actuality? It doesn't matter. We all came from Babylon. In Babylon, there were 70 nations, the 70 nations of the world. And therefore, we have no idea what do we belong to what nation, etc. When Abraham established his Kabbalistic group in order to bring them out of Babylon and bring them to the land of Israel, he simply called out to all the Babylonians and said, whoever wants to come with me, please. Some responded, some didn't, and those that did, out of them, he built a group that are called Israel, meaning those aimed straight toward the Creator. That's where we're headed. Headed how? Spiritually. Meaning to meet the condition of love another as yourself, and physically going to the root of that spiritual quality in our world, meaning to the land that geographically is called Israel. Historically wise, it's said that there were about 5 or 6 tribes there that also in their turn divided into further clans, etc. Where here in Israel? I mean in Babylon. In Babylon there were 70 small nations. But a nation, back then, 20, 30 people could already be a nation, etc. It's like Europe in the Middle Ages. Where does the number 70 come from? Is it something Kabbalistic? Because this is how the spiritual roots form their consequences in our world. Zeranpin and Malchut, 6 and 1, and each of them is divided into 10 more. Right, Zeranpin consists of 7, each consisting of 10, etc. So, from what I understand, they wrote about it from the spiritual point of view, that our desire divides into 70 nations, but there doesn't have to be a strict correlation to our world, meaning, were we to historically study about it, it could have also happened in a different way too. No. Even if we take Josephus Flavius as an example, who's considered to be a great historian, he was captured by the Romans, but actually he left with them. From conquered Judea, there was practically nothing left here, it was all destroyed, and he moved to Rome, he was taken there. They built an enormous institute for him. There were hundreds of people working under him, so that he'll be able to write his commentaries. And this too is something that's written about, and therefore we can't say that what he writes is untrue or in some way imagined. Do Kabbalists relate to it somehow? No, Kabbalists don't really relate to it because he's not writing about spiritual states. He's describing what happens in our world already as a result. But nonetheless, his book begins with that in the beginning the Creator created the heaven and earth, and that's how the Torah writes about it. So you as a Kabbalist can affirm that the results that he writes about in our world clearly correspond to the spiritual laws that you're familiar with from the spiritual world? Yes, of course. So he wrote about it correctly. Yes, absolutely. Because historians, they can distort things. No. He wasn't on such a level. Also, the Romans weren't on such a level. They simply need to fix everything, what they did for future generations. He, in their eyes, glorified them for generations. That's why they gave him such conditions. And he was able to depict it all. However, this is from the historic point of view, and it's interesting to see what Rabash writes about it. He says, we must remember what Israel and the rest of the nations mean in the spiritual work, according to the rule that they all pertain to one person. Israel is called bestowal, whose actions are only to bestow. This is called man's good inclination. The rest of the nations are man's vessels of reception, called man's evil inclination. Right, but it doesn't mean one nation and the rest of the nations. What it talks about is first of all about a person who is in the attainment of the spiritual world, and he is in attainment because he came to the recognition where all of his actions are only in order to bestow onto others, and in that case, he's called Israel. And once he falls from that level, he's no longer called Israel, he's called the nations. So the entire confusion is that people don't correctly, right, because they relate it to the flesh. They relate it to man himself, all of these names, but actually, they need to be interpreted in a completely different way. So a certain desire inside myself, I call it the nations of the world. A different type of desire, I call it Israel. Yes. And the same person could be both Israel, and then the nations of the world, and again Israel, and again the nations of the world, depending on the spiritual states that he's in. Okay, so let's talk about their function. Israel has a particular, specific function, as I understand. They're meant to establish a connection with the nations of the world. That's their main function. The function of Israel is in order to achieve connection between themselves, such a connection that will really tie them together, and then through that connection to pass on the higher energy, higher force that connects everything, unites all levels of creation all together, right down to our world, to pass this upper, higher connecting energy to all the nations of the world and altogether to all the other levels in nature, still vegetative and the animate. So we're talking about Israel as the center of connection, and if this center of connection does not realize its function, its role, then the system in which Israel and the nations of the world exist in forces the nations of the world to somehow negatively influence or push Israel. Yes, meaning it happens automatically in the measure to which Israel need to pass through themselves in their current point of development of the system of all the souls and the worlds and everything. If Israel does not pass positive energy onto them, then there's a negative reaction from them, a demand. Where is what we need to receive now? So they do it unconsciously, on the one hand, but also consciously on the other, semi-consciously. They don't know why they feel hostile towards Israel and have a special demand towards them, but this demand appears. And they confirm that you, Israel, are the source of all troubles in the world. And truly that's how it is. You need to make it so that everything will be good in the world. Everything depends on you. Do you understand what they're saying? They're saying that we all depend on you, and you're not carrying out your role. So again, to look at it from the point of view, from a scientific point of view, suppose. There's creation that's divided into two parts. The one is called Israel, the other, the nations of the world. And it's not related to the nations themselves, but to a specific type, like certain people were chosen, they're the bearers of this quality, and the others are the bearers of another quality. Yeah. And then, if that part called Israel do not carry out their role, the nations of the world come with a demand, with hostility, and it's realized on the human, on the social level as anti-Semitism. Yes, that's been around for thousands of years, naturally. And no one understands, neither Israel nor the nations of the world. Where does it all come from? But it's all written in Kabbalah. It's written in the Torah too, of course. That hate from the nations of the world towards the nation of Israel appears naturally. There's no other phenomenon similar to it. And the function of Israel and the nations of the world are not chosen by them themselves. It's nature. Nature grades it that way. It's graded that way according to the soul. And it can be felt by any person in the world. Maybe now some Inuit person starts feeling that he has a need to reveal the quality of nature, the cause and consequence. What do I exist for? Why? What for? Meaning he aspires to the Creator, the source of this knowledge and revelations, and he starts digging into it. And according to his aspiration, he's already related to what's called Israel, meaning being aimed straight toward the Creator. So being a chosen nation is graded actually by nature. It's determined by nature. I'd put it this way. To be the chosen people has two parts. On the one side, there's a part that exists in a person from above, as if he's chosen by the higher force, and gives him a desire towards it. On the other hand, it is a person who feels that yearning for the attainment of the higher force and puts an effort into it, into attaining it. Meaning here, it's necessary to have both an awakening from above and from below. Bala Sulam writes about it in the article, The Giving of the Torah. Why was the Torah given specifically to the Israeli nation and not to all the people in the world equally? Is there, God forbid, nationalism involved here? Of course, only an insane person would think so. Of course. Meaning he clearly relates it all to nature, that nature set it that way, that there's this type and that type of people, and each has their own function. Let's ask the following question, If you had a serious opportunity to turn to the nations of the world and tell them, let's switch, do you agree or not? Only let's switch everything. You say we have all riches, all the knowledge, you say that we have all the power, all the influence, that we're twisting everyone around our little finger, etc. Do you agree to change places with us according to what you see in the world? Do you agree or not? I don't know. Interesting question. So ask. I'll try it out. I think we'll have an opportunity to do it in the future. Next excerpt, very interesting, from the book Well of Living Waters. It's a very good commentary on the Torah, Be'er Maim Chaim. It's one of the commentaries to the Torah, okay? It's written, Israel receive all the abundance first, and from them everything spreads to all the worlds, and therefore they're called Israel, so-called Li Rosh, literally meaning I have a head, meaning they're the first to receive the abundance and the blessing, and then it passes on to everyone else, meaning their function is only to receive and then pass it on. It's not a simple function to be a mediator between the Creator and the created beings. Do you understand what that is? To be in pressure, under pressure from both sides. And this what's required of us? Yes? Well, okay, probably it's complicated, but still. Eventually, like you said, and it says in the source texts, that the entire thought of creation is to delight the nations of the world, meaning our desire to receive. Right. Israel doesn't exist for its own sake, but only in order to pass on the abundance, and this is what makes them the chosen people. Right. Being the chosen people from the point of view of being obliged, being the conductors of the Creator. Eventually, they are the world. They're the purpose of creation. Right. And we merely carry out our function. That's it. So the entire world was created for them. Yes. The Creator wants to pass all the abundance on to them. Yes. It is written so. Yes. And we're only the conduit. And we, again, it's not Jews as a nationality, but that part of people that the Creator chose from the 70 nations in order to pass on the abundance. Yes. And so, probably from the point of view of nature, they're more suitable for this function. Of course. We can put it that way. Yes. Meaning, evolutionally, they were chosen. In them exists an enormous desire to receive. In us exists the rudiment of the desire to bestow, which we need to correct, and this way to provide them with the complete and full fulfillment. And it's also interesting what Bala Sulam writes about it, and I'm bringing quotations on purpose so that people will understand that we're not inventing anything, but Bala Sulam wrote it. In his article, Mutual Guarantee, Bala Sulam writes that the purpose of Israel is to bring all of humanity to the purpose of creation, no one missing. Further, he writes, it is certain and unequivocal that the purpose of creation lies on the shoulders of the whole of the human race, black or white or yellow, without any essential difference. Right, that the goal is the same for everyone, and eventually when we come to that goal, we see that there's no difference whatsoever between people. And even what they went through in their own history, it all merges into this one common kli, common system, in which everyone's interconnected. Everyone completes everyone else. Everyone is completely included of everyone else, and therefore, and the final result, there is no difference whatsoever between all the parts of creation. So, from the Creator's perspective, for him there's no difference between Israel or some African tribe. No, none. And the final result, there's no difference. Can we compare it to, suppose, just like I don't differentiate between the nerve cells that are more important to me than, I don't know, the This is on the way to correction. There are more important and less important parts, but eventually, where everything becomes included in one another, everything and everything, then the complete inclusion means that everyone becomes completely equal. So I wanted to give an example, but you already kind of answered, so my head, for example, is more important to me than my arm. It's not like asking myself about what's more important to me, my toe, or... It's all clear, but it's all on the way to correction. But eventually, at the end, in the final result, it all comes together, and there's nothing redundant, nothing great or small, important or non-important. Okay, so we have two functions. The function of Israel that need to pass on the abundance, let's say the method for the revelation of the Creator to the nations of the world. Not so much the method, because Israel themselves, they realized the method. The nations of the world receive from them already the fulfillment, the abundance. And therefore Israel need to dissolve among all the nations of the world in order to pass the light of the Creator to each and every part of the nations of the world. And this is what the 4 exiles were for, in order to mix with the nations of the world. Right, and so it says that at the end of correction, the nation of Israel, as if spreads out to all the nations in order to fulfill each and every knot of that enormous one soul. So the quality of bestowal, if this is how we look at it, needs to cover the entire land, meaning desire, that the entire desire needs to be covered with the quality of bestowal. Yes. And if I correctly understand or remember, the first temple symbolized the connection only between 12 tribes, then the second temple of 2 tribes, and the third temple will symbolize the unification or connection between the people of Israel and the nations of the world. And this is why they were destroyed, in order to be rebuilt in this way. Yes. Another interesting fact, that all throughout history, the nation of Israel remain the bearers of this special ability to connect, unite in the direction of good or bad, but they have this special quality, the ability to unite societies and entire civilizations. It can also be in a bad direction, but they have this kind of quality. If they're the bearers of the quality of the Creator, then the quality of the Creator is connection, and this is something that they can do. Baal HaTurim, Yaakov ben Asher, writes that the name Yehudi, Jew, comes from the word yichud, connection, meaning a person who attains connection with a higher force. So what's the difference? Because sometimes they're called Jews and sometimes they're called Israel. No, it's a quality. Israel, it's according to the direction, the goal. And the attainment of the goal is attained by the connection, unity of the parts. And thus is called Yehudi, Jew. So this entire system comprises this enormous unity connection between all of its parts, is supposed to comprise. We're supposed to unite it. And therefore everywhere it says that we need to come to unity. Kabbalah says everywhere that it's necessary to connect. And Baal HaSulam writes that the Torah was given to the people of Israel for them to reach completion, yet they are fulfilling the role of conduits. Okay, we have 8 minutes left, and what I'd like to ask about is the problem that appears. When we talk about spiritual qualities, everything's clear. Israel and every person, we can take any person from Africa, the desire for the Creator can appear in them, just like in any Russian or American, etc. And in them exists both the desire for the Creator and the desires called nations of the world. That's clear. But when we look at the manifestation of it, and people in our world as nationality, turns out that they're Jews, that by nationality are Jews, and they have no aspiration for spirituality. Right. So, why does nature demand of them, nonetheless, to be conduits? In our world, there is a reflection of the higher system, and therefore, and every person from that multitude of people, that's how it's called, the big multitude that came out of Babylon, in each of them nonetheless exists this point of aspiration for the Creator. So, if they're from there, then that point exists in them for sure, and you only need to awaken it. But since, you mean from ancient Babylon? Yes, but since for many thousands of years we were conquered by different nations, tribes, etc. Many joined us too, right? We were dependent on many, many joined us, etc. Then what turns out is that in the nations of the world, there are many such, how to put it, in the nations of the world, there are many such people in whom there is a rudiment from us, and in us there is a rudiment of other nations, meaning a kind of mix. Yeah, ideological mix, physical mix. It's very hard to scrutinize these things, sort them out, and this already relates to higher biology. From the genetic point of view, we know that if you take a Jew that came from ancient Babylon, and you take people who live nowadays in Iraq, Iran, practically they're genetically identical. Why? Because they came from there. Right, they came from ancient Babylon, meaning those Jews. And then a large amount of people joined, and they too today are called Jews, because Jew is a person who has taken upon himself Judaism, meaning at some historical point accepted this idea of the one God, etc., and stay that way. I don't think that this is something that we need to get into altogether, because it's futile how to sort people. Because today we're coming to such a method of sorting which is actually final, meaning that every person defines himself according to his aspiration for the attainment of the Creator through connection with others or not. And practically, it's written about it in Kabbalistical texts. So to look only at a person's aspiration, are you willing to connect with others in order to attain the Creator? That's why you're called Yehudi, Jew, from the word Yehud, connection. That's it. And really thank God that we have only one species of people left, Homo sapiens. Before that, as historians write, there were the Neanderthals, and there are about 20 different species that existed simultaneously. Can you imagine what wars there would have been were they to exist now? Today we can relatively define according to the person from which of those systems, biological systems, which system does he relate to, refer to. But what do we need it for? Yep, we have enough problems as it is due to misunderstandings, so what conclusions can we draw? A. Israel is a special group of people, meaning these are conductors, those aspiring for the Creator, to attain and reveal the Creator. And they need to pass on what they reveal, this method, the light, the opportunity to all other people, regardless of anything. And if they don't do it, then everyone hates them. They're hated because they as if cut a person off from the higher harmony, abundance, etc. And if they do it, then obviously they're favorable. So we can draw the following formula, natural formula, that all bad things in the world come as a result of bad relations between people. Everyone agrees, economists, but how to come to that? But everyone agrees that problems in the family, health, it's all due to that. On the one side. Also, it said that all the bad things in the world, the reason for that is Israel. Because they create on all levels the correct connection between all parts of nature, of the organism, etc. So all bad things in the world, all the bad comes from the Jews and all the good comes from the Jews. So you only need to force them to do good. So if Israel will create good ties in the world, meaning will bring the method of how to correctly communicate between people. And this is actually what's described in the Torah as I understand, only it has to be deciphered. Meaning that the main law there is love another as yourself, and it's simply necessary to pass that method on to others. And from what I understand from the source texts is that the nation of Israel, they're the first who need to acknowledge their role, meaning they themselves need to connect, meaning you can't pass on the method without first connecting. Right, necessarily. To realize that connection amongst themselves and to pass it on to others. And then be an example, a role model. So it's not even to pass on the method, right? To be an example. In the measure to which we'll realize it, they'll become similar to us. They will become similar to us. And where's the Creator in all of this? The Creator influences through those ties from Him to us and from us to the nations of the world. And you believe that it's possible to explain? You don't really need to explain it to anyone. We simply need to act between ourselves first and foremost, between ourselves and the Creator. and once we'll establish the right connection between us, immediately to pass it on to the nations of the world. So, from all the 8 billion people in the world, anyone who feels that he has an inspiration for it, they need to realize upon themselves what it says in the method itself, in the Torah or in the wisdom of Kabbalah. Okay, I hope we don't confuse anyone. No, it's all gonna work out. People hear it here and there, and we're in such times that everything becomes evident in and of itself. So the main thing is to understand that there's a method here, a remedy, by which we can save the world. I think that the main thing here is that we need to detach ourselves from nationality, division. Actually, from the Kabbalistic point of view, there's no nationality, but it all depends on a person's direction. It's very confusing, because otherwise the Torah is perceived as the most extreme literature, obviously. Okay, so today we talked about the concept of Israel and the nations of the world, and until next time, all the best.